I still remember the day my story truly began. Not on the stage at graduation like most people would assume, but years earlier, back in the tiny yellow house on Ashwood Lane where my family lived. I grew up in what most neighbors thought was a normal family, but inside those walls, normal was just an illusion. My name is Caroline Parker, though most people just call me Carrie. I was the oldest of 3 kids. My younger brother, Ethan, was the golden boy, the one my mom, Linda, practically worshipped. My little sister, Maya, was the baby, too sweet to see the storm clouds that were always brewing in our house. And then there was Mitha, one who never quite measured up, at least in Mom's eyes. To outsiders, Mom was the picture-perfect suburban parent. She baked pies for the church sale, wore pearls to PTA meetings, and always smiled just wide enough to hide her teeth when gossiping with neighbors. But behind closed doors, her smile dropped like a mask. With me, her tone was sharp, her words like daggers. "Carrie, why do you always insist on wearing those ridiculous clothes? No wonder nobody likes you at school." She'd sneer as I tugged on a faded sweater. Or worse, "Don't embarrass me." Ethan got straight A's again. "And you?" "I guess C's are better than D's." I'd bite my tongue until it nearly bled because arguing only made things worse. Dad. Well, Dad was around technically, but he was one of those men who shrank in his chair whenever Mom raised her voice. He worked long hours, came home tired, and rarely intervened. He was more of a ghost than a father, always present, but never really there. From a young age, I learned that the only way out of that house was through achievement. I buried myself in books, took on part-time jobs, and poured everything into my studies. Unlike Ethan, who had everything handed to him, I clawed my way through every test, every paper, every late-night cram session. By my senior year of high school, I had something. Mom couldn't take from me a full-ride scholarship to one of the top universities in the state. When the acceptance letter arrived, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd finally be proud. Instead, she pursed her lips, skimmed the page, and said, "Well, I suppose that's nice. But don't expect me to pay for your dorm supplies. You made this choice, you can live with it." I smiled anyway because her approval wasn't my fuel anymore. My freedom was just a few months away. Graduation was supposed to be my victory lap. For years of late nights, of whispered insults from Mom, of watching Ethan bask in the spotlight, it was all supposed to lead here. I'd be the first in our family to walk across that stage with honors, the first to prove I could stand on my own 2 feet. But as the date approached, the tension in our house grew unbearable. Mom criticized everything: the way I practiced my speech, the dress I bought with my own money, even the way I invited relatives. At dinner one night, she smirked over her wine glass. "You're really making a spectacle out of this, aren't you? Acting like you're some kind of celebrity? It's just high school, Carrie. Don't get ahead of yourself." I wanted to scream that it wasn't just high school, it was survival. But instead, I clenched my fists under the table and forced myself to stay calm. Looking back, I should have seen it the way her eyes hardened whenever someone praised me. The sharp tone that cut deeper the more I succeeded. But I was blinded by hope. I kept telling myself, she's my mom. Deep down, she has to love me. What I didn't know then was that my mother's resentment had already crossed a dangerous line. At the time, I only noticed small things, like the way she made snide comments about how expensive my graduation was turning out to be, or how she volunteered to help with the reception, even though she had never once lifted a finger for my school events before. "Don't worry, Carrie," she said with that sugary sweet voice she used in public. "I'll take care of the refreshments. You just focus on your little speech." Her words should have comforted me. Instead, they made my stomach twist. Ethan, of course, couldn't resist rubbing salt in the wound. "So, Carrie, do we all have to clap when you get your piece of paper? Or can we just leave early?" He chuckled, his arm draped over the back of his chair like he was king of the house. "Shut up, Ethan," I muttered. Mom's eyes snapped to me like lasers. Don't talk to your brother like that. He's just teasing. Honestly, Carrie, your attitude lately has been unbearable. And Maya, sweet, innocent Maya. She just sat there, looking between us with wide eyes, too young to understand but old enough to feel the tension pressing down like a storm cloud. Still, despite the bitterness, I refused to let them ruin it for me. Graduation was mine, my hard work, my day. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I'd sit at my desk and rehearse my speech. The words gave me strength. I wrote about perseverance, about rising above circumstances, about how education wasn't just a path to knowledge, but a way to escape the cages we were born into. In the mirror, I practiced smiling through the pain. Because if there was one thing I had learned, it was that survival meant performing pretending to be okay, even when your heart ached. 2 nights before graduation, I caught Mom in the kitchen, whispering on the phone. "Oh, yes, I'll make sure everything goes smoothly," she said, her back turned. Her tone was calm, like someone planning something meticulous. When she noticed me, she snapped, "What are you doing up? Go to bed." I mumbled an excuse and trudged upstairs, but her voice stayed lodged in my head like a thorn. Something was coming. I could feel it. And I was right. Because what happened on the day of my graduation wasn't just another family argument or another cutting remark. It was something darker, something I never imagined a mother could do to her own child. The morning of graduation felt like standing on a cliff's edge watching fog move in. I woke up before dawn, not because I set an alarm, but because my brain wouldn't stop racing. The air in my room felt heavy, like those final minutes before a thunderstorm, when the whole sky holds its breath. I slipped into the dress I'd saved up for, a simple navy sheath with a modest neckline, smoothed the honor cords I'd earned through endless study sessions and club hours. I'd hidden those cords in a shoebox under my bed because I didn't trust leaving anything important in the open. Call it paranoia or call it experience. Downstairs, the house smelled like lemon polish and frosting. Mom was at the kitchen island arranging cupcakes on tiered stands, each one iced within an inch of its life. Ethan lounged in the doorway, scrolling his phone, while Maya balanced on a stool, peering at the swirls of buttercream like they were fairy castles. "Morning," I said, my voice tight. Didn't look up. "Your robe better be wrinkle-free, Caroline." Pictures start promptly at 9:30. The last thing I need is you looking slovenly. Slovenly? That was one of her favorite words for me. "My robe's fine," I said, setting my bag on a chair. She finally turned, her eyes sweeping over me. "That dress is mature," she said, as if mature were an insult. "Are you sure navy is flattering on your complexion?" I stared at her. "Yes." She made a little theft sound and turned back to her frosting knife. "Pack something special for you," she said, like the word special had quotation marks. She held up a mason jar of pale yellow liquid with a gingham lid. A ribbon was tied around the top like it was auditioning for a country living magazine cover. A small tag read, "For Carrie Lemon Lavender." I didn't move to take it. "Thanks," I said carefully. "But they probably won't let outside drinks into the stadium." "Nonsense." Her smile was tight, all performance. "This is for later after your little walk across the stage. For the reception. Your favorite, isn't it?" I infused it with extra lavender buds. So soothing, soothing. The word made a cold whisper slide down my spine. "Thanks," I repeated, and put it gently in the tote with my robe and cords. Ethan snorted. "You're going to need soothing after that speech," he said. "Hope you've practiced not boring people to death," Ithamaya said, frowning. "What? I'm just saying." He smirked at me. "Don't forget to thank me for being such a great role model." I looked at Dad, who had shuffled in quietly and stood near the coffee maker, trying to shrink into the kitchen tiles. He opened his mouth like he might say something, then closed it again. The coffee machine hissed. Silence swallowed us for a beat, and then Mom clapped her hands. "Let's move, people. I want the best seats. I'll not be stuck behind some giant with a foam finger like last year." Last year wasn't my day, but she always told that story like she was the victim. We piled into the car, cupcakes, banners, my things, the jar with the ribbon. The drive to the stadium took 15 minutes, maybe less, but it felt like hours. Mom talked the whole time how the table linens she'd chosen would elevate the reception look, how the neighbors were so excited to attend, how she'd ordered extra bottles of sparkling cider for the kids and a little something special for the adults. I watched the streets pass in a sun-bleached blur and tried not to think about the night I'd heard her whispering in the kitchen. Everything's going to go smoothly. The words rattled around in my head. My fingers tightened around my cords in my lap. At the stadium entrance, we were funneled through. Security, a couple of uniformed officers, stood near the metal detectors alongside school staff volunteers. They were checking bags for prohibited items. And every few seconds, someone had to toss a forgotten pocket knife or a bottle of water. Mom's smile turned brittle. Honestly, she muttered. Do they think we're smuggling contraband to a high school graduation? One of the officers was a woman with a dark braid tucked under her cap. Her nameplate read Monroe. She had the steady, unhurried look of someone who'd seen too many dramas to be fazed by one more. Morning, Officer Monroe said as we shuffled forward. Bags open, please. Dad unzipped the camera case. Ethan shoved his phone in his pocket. Maya handed over her tiny glitter purse, empty except for lip balm and a crumpled tissue. I opened my tote. The mason jar caught the light, pale yellow and innocent. What's this? Officer Monroe asked, her tone neutral as she glanced inside. A homemade lemonade for the reception, Mom said quickly, reaching to take it. Out, her voice switching to that honeyed register she used for people in uniforms. I'm in charge of refreshments. Monroe's eyes flicked to the tag and ribbon. Sorry, ma'am. No homemade beverages past the checkpoint policy. Mom laughed like it was all a charming misunderstanding. Inside. It's for the school reception afterward. They asked parents to bring items. Happy to leave it with the coordinator. Or, she turned to me. Carrie can keep it in the graduate staging area. Private tents and all that? My teeth pressed together. Mom, ma'am, Monroe said, still polite, still neutral. Any liquid has to be sealed and commercially labeled or it can't come in. If it's for the reception, it needs to go directly to the event staff at the loading bay. You can circle round. Mom's smile, froze, then cracked. That's ridiculous. I know the coordinator. Ma'am, Monroe repeated, and something in her tone clipped shorter, firmer. Those are the rules. A little line appeared between Mom's eyebrows. She looked just for a second like the mask had slipped. Then she smoothed it back into place and sighed dramatically. Fine, fine, I'll take it back to the car. She shot me a look, something sharp and accusing, as if I'd orchestrated this to make her look foolish. Dad offered to walk with her, but she waved him off. I watched her heels click away on the pavement, the jar cradled like a precious trophy in her hands. Then I followed the stream of Capangown students to the staging area, found my row, and tried to breathe. The field was a patchwork of folding chairs and families clutching bouquets, the kind of chaotic ceremony that smells like sunscreen and hairspray. Backstage, seniors were fixing tassels, hugging teachers, taking selfies in clusters that shifted and reformed like flocks of birds. I checked my name card, ran a thumb over the embossed seal, and smoothed my cords again. Carrie, a voice, called, breathless. It was Kayla, my lab partner, and the nearest thing I had to a best friend. She bounced into a hug, her curls brushing my cheek. You ready? Oh my God, I can't believe it's today. Me neither. I managed a smile that felt like it was stitched onto my face. You look amazing. So, do you? She said in hay. She tugged lightly at my cords. You earned those. My eyes stung. Thanks. An event volunteer stepped onto a chair and shouted for quiet. We fell into lines by homeroom. The band struck up those first pompous notes, and people started moving like an enormous, awkward parade. As the sun climbed higher, I felt sweat prick under my collar. Across the field, I spotted my family in the second section. Front row end cap. Mom had been right. She'd gotten good seats. She waved her program at me like a flag and mouthed posture. The principal made his speech. A member of the school board followed with a story he'd clearly told every year since the Reagan administration. Then it was my turn to walk up the side stairs and stand at the lectern for the student address. I'd printed 2 copies of my speech, one for my hand and one tucked into the file folder the school kept at the podium. I pulled out the hand copy and realized my stomach dropped that the stack in my hands wasn't my speech. The font was wrong. It's the spacing. It's the top line read, "Thank you to my supportive family who never let me forget how much I needed them." It wasn't my sentence. The words were cloying and strange, like someone had taken my voice and dipped it in sugar. The next paragraph was worse. Sentences about humility and knowing my place. An entire line praising my brother for inspiring my competitive spirit. I didn't even have to guess who had done this. The paper smelled faintly of Mom's lilac hand lotion. For a heartbeat, the world tunneled. The band's notes turned tinny. My pulse rattled in my throat. She swapped it when? How, Carrie? The assistant principal whispered from just behind the curtain. "You're on?" I swallowed hard and stepped into the sun. 1,000 faces swam before me. My family leaned forward. Mom had her phone up, recording. I set the imposter speech aside and spoke from memory. "Good morning," I began, and my voice shook. I steadied it. When I was a freshman, I thought high school was a place where you learned facts. Somewhere between textbooks and tests, though it became a place where I learned to stand up. A ripple of chatter moved through the crowd. I continued, grasping for the shape of the speech I'd written in my room at midnight, line by line. The main idea, the tiny stories, the way I'd planned to end. My mouth was dry. I glanced at the water bottle placed for Spic as a standard issue. Plastic sealed. I twisted the cap and took a sip, then forced a smile. "Some of us had cheerleaders," I said, "and some of us had resistance training." A small laugh fluttered from the students. Either way, we built muscles. From the front row, Mom made an exaggerated gesture, like, "Louder." Then I saw her mouth the word family and tap her chest. I kept talking, refusing that prompt with all the power of a stubborn heartbeat. My hands trembled until they didn't. By the time I reached the ending, my voice was steady. "So let's not pretend we got here by magic," I finished. "We got here by grit. And as we go forward, may we build the lives we deserve." Applause rose, uneven at first, then brighter. I stepped away from the mic as the band struck up the recessional. As I came down the steps, the assistant principal squeezed my shoulder. "Nice job," she said. "That last line strong." I nodded, dizzy with adrenaline and something else. A sticky mix of anger and relief. Back at my seat, Kayla squeezed my hand. "Who swapped your pages?" she hissed. "My mom," I whispered. "It had to be." "Psycho," she said, but not unkindly. "You were better without it anyway." We marched. We turned our tassels. We threw our caps and laughed and pretended we weren't all standing on the edge of that cliff, peering over into futures we couldn't see. Then we spilled out onto the field where families surged like a tide to collect their graduates. Mom descended on me in a cloud of perfume. "Why didn't you use the pages I left for you?" Her voice was a smile with teeth. My version was warmer. "You replaced my speech," I said. Without asking, her eyes glittered. "You're welcome. You sounded cold, ungrateful." She thrust a bouquet at me. The flowers were fake silk peonies with rhinestone centers because real flowers droop in photos. The stems scratched my palm. Dad gave me a quick one-armed hug. "Proud of you, kiddo," he said softly, almost too soft to hear. Ethan slung an arm across my shoulders like a yoke. "Congrats on peaking," he said cheerfully. "Hope the university knows what it's getting." I shrugged him off. "Where's Maya?" "Right here." She chirped, dodging between knees with a handmade sign that said, "Go carry in glitter glue." My chest tightened. "You were amazing," she said. "You sounded like a hero." I leaned down and hugged her, letting the smell of her strawberry shampoo push back the sourness in my chest. "Thanks, Bug." Pictures followed, posed, stiff, staged. In every one, Mom angled herself toward the camera like a pageant contestant, chin lifted, shoulders squared. "Hold your cords so we can see them," she said. "But don't flaunt. It's tacky to flaunt." "Then why tell me to hold them?" I muttered. "What was that? Nothing?" We moved toward the reception lawn, where tables stretched under white tents. The school orchestra sawed away at something vaguely classical, while parents hovered near platters of store-bought cookies. Mom beelined to the catering area like she ran the place. "There you are," she said to a volunteer. "I'm Linda Parker, Refreshments Committee. I brought cupcakes." The volunteer smiled gratefully, and Mom orchestrated the display like a general laying out battle plans. That's when I noticed the letters. She'd arranged the cupcakes to spell Ethan. "What is that?" I asked, pointing. She blinked at me, innocent as a lamb. "Oh, that. I had a few extras from Ethan's banquet last week. Waste not." "Want not? It's my graduation." She shrugged. A little family pride never hurt anyone. Something inside me crumpled, then stiffened into a new shape. People were milling, bumping elbows, offering congratulations. Mom waved to neighbors over and introduced me like an exhibit at a museum. "This is my eldest, Caroline," she said, emphasizing the full name she knew I didn't prefer. She finally found her stride after a rocky start. "We're hopeful she'll keep it up in college." She got a full ride, Dad said, surprising me. It was the first time he'd sounded like he wanted to claim me in public. Mom's smile tightened. "Scholarships often consider need," she said lightly. "And they were looking for rural representation this year." Heat flashed up my neck. "They were looking for merit," I said too loudly. A couple of heads turned. Mom leaned in, whisper sweet. "Don't be crass, dear. It's unbecoming." I stepped back. "Do not cry." The mantra thudded with my pulse. Not here. Not in front of them. Kayla slid in like a guardian angel. "Pictures with the lab crew," she chirped, grabbing my elbow. "Stat?" We posed for a few quick shots, laughing too hard, pretending none of us had parents who could bruise us with a sentence. For a moment, the world softened around the edges. Then a familiar voice cut back in. "Caroline," Mom called, beckoning me with two stiff fingers. "I have your drink. You must be parched after that speech." She held out a plastic bottle with a "Congrats, grad" sticker slapped over the label. The liquid inside was that same pale yellow. My stomach folded in on itself. "I'll just have water," I said quickly, lifting the sealed bottle from the table. She tilted her head. "Water, dear, with a little flavor. You know how? You hate plain water. I'll stick with plain." I took a step back. Her smile sharpened. "Caroline, don't be rude. I made this for you." I looked at the sticker, at the tape sealing the cap. It didn't look factory tight. It looked redone. Tiny bubbles clung to the inside of the plastic like it had been shaken and then settled. "I'm fine," I repeated, and turned to go. "Stop," she said, the word low and flat. She didn't say it like a mother asking. She said it like an order. "You're being ungrateful." Neighbors shifted. Conversations faltered. I felt the eyes. The old choreography fell into place. I yield. She wins. We all go home pretending this is normal. My fingers loosened on the water bottle. Then Ethan, ever the showman, plucked the "Congrats, grad" drink from Mom's hand. "She doesn't want it," he said, grinning. "I'll take it." He popped the cap and raised it toward his mouth. Mom's hand flashed out and grabbed his wrist so hard he yelped. "That's not for you," she snapped. Silence dropped around us. Ethan's eyes went wide, confusion flickering into something like fear. "Geez, okay," he muttered. Pulling back, chill. My heart thudded. "Why did she, ma'am?" a calm voice said from behind us. I turned. Officer Monroe stood a few feet away, hands loose at her sides, expression unruffled. I hadn't even noticed her step into the tent. "Could I have a word?" Mom's mouth flattened. "We're celebrating." "Of course." Monroe's gaze slid to the bottle in Mom's hand. "Got the beverage policy." "Mind if I take a quick look?" "It's just lemonade," Mom said. The smile was back, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I was told to bring refreshments." "Understood. If you wouldn't mind setting it down on the table for me?" Mom didn't move. For one long breath, her knuckles whitened around the plastic. Then she placed the bottle on the tablecloth with exaggerated care, as if it might shatter. "Thank you," Monroe said. She lifted it, turned it in her hands, studying the sticker. "The rim, did you prepare this at home?" "I flavored water," Mom said. "For my daughter." "Is that a crime now?" "No, ma'am." Monroe's tone never changed. "Would you mind opening another one from the same batch?" Her eyes flicked to a tote at Mom's feet. The same tote I'd seen by the cupcakes. I don't see why that's necessary," Mom said lightly. "This is ridiculous. Who even are you to question Mom?" I cut in, my voice threadbare. "Just give it to her." But Mom didn't. Instead, she reached for the bottle again, fingers hovering like a hawk over prey. "Ma'am," Monroe said, firmer, "please step back." People were watching openly now. The orchestra song frayed and ended. Conversations died. Somewhere, a child started crying. Ethan rubbed his wrist and shot me a look I'd never seen on him before. Something like, "Is she okay?" Mom laughed, high and brittle. "This is harassment. Everyone brings drinks. Everyone. You're singling me out because you saw me at the gate." "That's right," Monroe said. "I did see you at the gate." She nodded to another officer. Near the tent entrance, a burly guy with a crew cut who had drifted closer. "And I'd like to clarify a few things, if you don't mind." Mom's eyes darted, a trapped animal flicker. Then she tipped the bottle as if to pour it into an empty cup. Monroe moved faster than looks possible in a starch-stiffed uniform. She caught the bottle mid-tilt, the plastic crumpling softly under her grip, and set it upright. "Ma'am, don't." A murmuring spread through the tent like a breeze. My scalp prickled. I felt the world narrowing again, all edges and glare. And breath I couldn't pull in deep enough. "Is there a problem?" Dad asked, finally, his voice small. Mom turned on him with a look that could slice glass. "Stay out of this." Monroe's voice cut clean through the air. "Miss Parker, I need you to step with me for a moment." "What for?" Mom demanded. "On what grounds?" The second officer spoke for the first time, his voice low. "We have concerns about tampering." The word landed like a stone in my stomach. Tampering. My mouth went dry. Mom gave a strangled laugh. "Tampering with lemonade." Monroe didn't flinch. "Please step aside." Now, for a heartbeat, I thought Mom might comply. Then I watched something shudder behind her eyes. She snatched up the bottle and in. A movement so quick it felt surreal, raised it toward her own mouth as if to take a swig. "See?" she said, too. Brightly, perfectly safe. Monroe's hand shot out, knocking the bottle away. It hit the grass with a soft thud, liquid sloshing, cap rolling under the table. The crowd gasped. "Ma'am," Monroe said, crisp as a snapped twig, "you are not to ingest or serve that." She glanced at the second officer. "Secure the area." People started backing up, gasps turning into a tide of whispers. The orchestra players lowered their instruments, gawking. Kayla's hand found mine and squeezed hard. Mom's nostrils flared. "This is outrageous." She tried to push past Monroe. "Caroline, tell them it's your favorite." "Tell them, Linda," Dad said. The word a plea. "Shut up," she hissed, and the way she said it made my skin crawl, like I'd never heard her voice before. Monroe kept her tone steady. "Miss Parker, if you don't step with me right now, we'll move to a different set of options." That was the moment. The humiliation stopped being subtle. Was no longer crooked smiles and sharpened words. It was raw and public and unignorable. People were watching my mother be confronted. People were watching me watch her. Maya tugged my sleeve, voice tiny. "Carrie, is Mommy in trouble?" I swallowed. "It's going to be okay," I lied, and the lie tasted like metal. Mom's face arranged itself into injured innocence. "This is a witch hunt," she declared, loud enough for the tent and most of the lawn to hear. "Because my daughter doesn't appreciate a mother's efforts. 'Cause she's been spreading lies about me for years. 'Cause she's ungrateful and vindictive. And ma'am, Monroe didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Enough." The second officer gently guided Mom away from the table, hands hovering near her elbows without touching. Monroe turned to me. The crowd blurred at the edges until there was only her face, calm and intent. "I need you to come with us as well," she said, "and I need to ask you a few questions about anything you've been offered to eat or drink today." My tongue felt thick. I didn't drink it," I said. "I didn't want to." "That's good." She nodded once, as if confirming a hypothesis. "That's very good." Mom twisted in the second officer's grip, her voice warbling. "Caroline, tell them this is absurd. Tell them. Tell them." I stared at her and something strange happened. The edges of her thinned a little. She looked smaller than she had 5 minutes ago, smaller than she'd seemed my entire life. Like the bright lacquered shell she wore had cracked, and I could see the brittle thing underneath. But the humiliation hadn't finished with me yet. From somewhere to my left, a neighbor's voice rose, sharp with judgment. "I always said Linda was intense," another voice chimed in, pitying. "Poor girl. On her graduation, too." Heat flooded my face, but this time it wasn't shame, it was fury, clean and hot and clarifying. I squeezed Maya's hand. "Stay with Dad," I told her, then looked at Dad. "Please." He nodded, eyes ashen, and put an arm around Maya's shoulders. Ethan stood frozen, phone dangling at his side for once with no joke ready. I turned back to Monroe. "'Kay," I said, and I heard my voice change. It steadied. "Ask me whatever you need." She met my gaze assessing. Maybe even a flicker of empathy dipped her head. "Let's step over here." As we moved toward the edge of the tent, I felt the sting of humiliation and the rip of betrayal warring inside me. This was supposed to be my date, the ribboned bouquet, the awkward photos, the relief of finally being seen for what I've done. Instead, I was being led away by a cop while my mother protested in theatrical gasps and neighbors clutched their pearls. But beneath the pain, a harder truth settled. Whatever story I've been telling myself, she's my mom. She must love me. It can't be as bad as it feels had finally met daylight. And daylight is merciless. "Ms. Parker," Monroe said quietly, once we were out of the main crush, "did your mother offer you any food or drink before the ceremony?" I thought of the jar with the ribbon, the way Mom had insisted. The phone call in the kitchen, the swapped pages, Ethan's wrist, the speed with which she'd grabbed him. "Yes," I said. "Twice." Monroe nodded, face unreadable. "Did you consume any? No?" "Good," she said again, and there was a tiny breath of relief in it this time. She radioed something I couldn't catch. A minute later, a staffer from the district arrived with a clipboard and a face like thunder, followed by the principal, pale and tight-lipped. Behind them, the second officer was guiding my mother toward a quiet corner, away from the tent. Kept glancing back at me, her expression slipping between fury and a warped kind of pleading. Monroe's attention returned to the bottle on the table, the one she'd confiscated. She lifted it with gloved hands I hadn't seen her put on. Methodical. "Careful, we're going to have this tested," she said, more to the principal than to me. "And we need to review any video from the prep areas." My skin went cold. "Video, they'll see it. Whatever it is." A hush had fallen over the lawn. The word tampering had spread like a spark in dry grass. I could feel the humiliation building towards something else, toward a jagged edge I hadn't dared to name. Yet, Caroline, Mom called suddenly, her voice high and cracking. Sweetheart, I didn't turn. I couldn't, because somewhere inside, a door I'd kept bolted for years had begun to open, and what was blowing through that opening wasn't shame anymore, or even fear. It was a gust of truth, cold and unstoppable, and it was about to expose everything I hadn't let myself say out loud. And that's when I understood. This was no longer just about a ruined speech or a table of cupcakes spelling my brother's name. This was about something darker she'd brought to my day, something the cop had seen, something I could no longer pretend wasn't real. Monroe looked at me as if she could hear the gears turning in my head. "We'll take it from here," she said, "but I'm going to need you to tell me everything, okay?" I nodded, and the nod felt like a vow. "Okay." As I opened my mouth to begin, the principal's radio crackled. Staffer's voice came through, agitated. "We've got footage," it said, "from the graduate staging tent. You're going to want to see this." Monroe's jaw tightened, and she gestured for us to follow. The crowd parted in a murmur. My mother's protesting voice faded behind me like a song gone out of tune. We were leaving the tent, the scene of my public humiliation, and walking toward a truth that would prove it wasn't humiliation at all. It was a warning, a line in the sand, and crossing it would change everything. I thought humiliation would be the end of it, the peak of the nightmare, where my mother had tried to steal my voice and then shoved a suspicious drink into my hand in front of the entire graduating class. But I was wrong. What came next was worse, because it tore away the last veil I'd been clinging to. It showed me who my mother really was. Not the woman who baked pies for the church sale or smiled too brightly at PTA meetings, but someone darker, someone dangerous. Officer Monroe led me and the principal toward a temporary office set up behind the stadium where staff were handling logistics. The air conditioning rattled, weak against the June heat. Inside, folding tables groaned under stacks of paperwork and leftover programs. The district staffer, gray-haired man with a clipboard, nodded grimly. "We pulled the feed from the staging tent," he said. "It's concerning." My palms were slick. "What does that mean?" "We'll show you," Monroe said. Her calm was like iron, steady and cold. A monitor flickered on. Grainy footage appeared, wide-angle, color washed out from the bright lights. It showed the graduates' prep area, long tables stacked with water bottles, folders, and programs. Students moved in and out, adjusting gowns, taking selfies. Then, like a ghost gliding in, my mother appeared. The video evidence, I sucked in a breath. She wasn't supposed to be there. Only students and staff were allowed. The footage showed her carrying a tote. She set it on the table, glanced over her shoulder, and pulled out a small roll of stickers, the same kind I'd seen slapped on the bottle she'd tried to give me. Methodically, she peeled labels and pressed them over the tops of water bottles, one by one. Her movements were precise, deliberate. She uncapped one, poured out a little liquid into a thermos she had tucked by her side, then tipped in something else from a smaller container. It was too grainy to see what, but the angle showed her screwing the cap back on, resealing it with a sticker, and setting it aside. "There," she mouthed, her lips forming the word clearly. She wiped her hands on a napkin and slid the tampered bottle into the row closest to my name card. The camera zoomed just enough to catch her face before she turned away. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't frowning either. Her expression was blank, mechanical. "That's my throat closed. That's my mother." The staffer looked at me with pity. We didn't want to assume, but yes. Monroe's jaw tightened. "Did you consume anything from that table?" I shook my head violently. "No, I brought my own sealed water." She tried. My breath hitched. She tried to make me drink it after. She pushed. You did the right thing," Monroe said firmly. She picked up the confiscated bottle from a bag, still gloved. "This matches the footage. We'll send it to the lab. But I want you to understand, this isn't just against school policy." Depending on what's in here, it could be a criminal. Matter. The word criminal buzzed in my ears like a hornet. My hands trembled so hard I had to clasp them together in my lap. Why? The word broke out of me, raw and ragged. Why would she do that? Nobody answered. The silence was worse than any explanation. After the video, Monroe pulled me aside away from the staff. "Carolyn, I need to ask you something personal," she said. "Kay, has your mother ever tried to control you through food or drink before? Anything that made you sick? Anything unusual?" Memories rushed up like floodwater. The tea she'd made when I was 12 that left me dizzy for hours. The vitamin smoothies she insisted I drink before exams that gave me stomach cramps. The way she hovered when I ate, watching every bite, smiling too hard if I pushed the plate away. I don't know," I whispered, but the truth burned behind my teeth. "Yes." Monroe nodded slowly, as if she already knew. "I want you to. Think carefully about what you've experienced at home. Not just today." My chest tightened. "She's my mom." Her voice softened, but her eyes stayed sharp. "And you're her daughter, which is why this is serious." When we stepped back into the tent, chaos had bloomed. Neighbors whispered in clusters, teachers stood stiff with unease, and Dad hovered near Maya like a lost child. Ethan paced, running both hands through his hair. Mom stood off to the side with a second officer, arms crossed, lips moving nonstop as she argued. Her voice carried, "This is absurd." It was lemonade. Who doesn't bring lemonade to a party? "You're ruining my daughter's special day with your paranoia." For once, no one rushed to agree with her. "Dad," I said, moving toward him. He looked at me, eyes bloodshot. "Carrie," he whispered. "What's happening?" My voice cracked. She tried to. I couldn't finish the sentence in front of Maya, but Maya tugged at my sleeve, her face pale. "Carrie, is Mommy bad?" I swallowed hard, kneeling down so I was eye level with her. "Mommy made a mistake," I said carefully. "A really big one. But you're safe, okay?" Her lip trembled, but she said it was your favorite." I hugged her so tightly she squeaked. My throat burned with unshed tears. That was when the neighbors began circling like vultures. Mrs. Davenport, who'd once complimented Mom's pie crusts at the church picnic, whispered loudly, "I always thought Linda had control issues." Mr. Green shook his head. A graduation, no less. What kind of mother? Their voices blended, judgmental and self-righteous. But none of them stepped closer to me. They only looked, whispering, staring, like I was a character in a scandal they'd waited years to see unfold. Humiliation burned through me again, but under it was something sharper. Rage. They'd seen her cruelty before, in pieces. They'd seen her cut me down at barbecues, dismiss me at bake sales, and they'd laughed nervously, brushed it off. Now they wanted to gossip. The principal returned with a grave face. "We'll need to pause the reception," he announced to the crowd. "There are some safety concerns we're addressing. Please remain calm and give the officers space." Gasps rippled through the tent. Parents clutched their children closer. Students whispered behind hands. Mom's voice rose, shrill. "This is ridiculous. They're framing me." She pointed at me, finger trembling. "She's always been against me. Always." Monroe stepped between us, her presence like a wall. "Ma'am, that's enough." Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried, silencing the murmurs. Standing there with the bottle bagged as evidence, and my mother's protests echoing off the tent poles, I felt the final piece of the puzzle lock into place. It wasn't just resentment. It wasn't just humiliation tactics. Wasn't even just sabotage. It was hatred. Somewhere along the line, my mother's envy had twisted into something poisonous, literally. She couldn't stand that I'd outshone Ethan, that I was leaving her control, that I'd carved a life that didn't depend on her approval. She hadn't wanted me to succeed. She hadn't even wanted me to survive. The thought froze my blood. Ethan finally stopped pacing. He walked toward me, his usual smirk gone, replaced by something hollow. "Carrie," he said, his voice low. She really did that." I looked at him. My golden boy brother who'd never doubted her love, never tasted her venom the way I had. For the first time, I saw confusion in his eyes cracks and the pedestal he'd lived on. "Yes," I said simply. He ran a hand down his face. I thought she just," his voice faltered. "I didn't think she'd go that far." Neither had I. When Monroe guided her toward the exit, Mom twisted one last time, her voice breaking. "Caroline, you're my daughter. How could you let them treat me this way? I did everything for you. Everything." The words should have hurt. For years, they had. But now, under the tent, with the evidence in plain view and the crowd staring, the spell was broken. I straightened. My shoulders. "No, Mom," I said, my voice carrying further than I expected. "You did everything for yourself." Gasps echoed. Mom's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, then closed it, the mask finally slipping for good. And that was the twist. It wasn't me being ungrateful or dramatic or rebellious. It was her. Always her. The poison hadn't just been in the bottle. It had been seeping into our family for years. As the officers led her away, Monroe glanced back at me. Her eyes softened just a little. "You're safe now," she said. "Safe." The word rang strange in my ears, like a language I hadn't spoken in years. Because for the first time in my life, I started to believe it. They led us out of the tent and into the thin shade behind the auditorium, where the building's brick wall radiated heat and the hum of the AC units filled the pauses that people were too scared to break. "Officer?" Monroe stood with me and the principal in a shallow wedge of quiet. Beyond us, the lawn was chaos arranged into neat suburban line sparents, forming little circles of concern. Teachers smoothing their name tags. The orchestra putting instruments into cases with the nervous care of people who want to help but don't know how. I could see Mom 10 yards away with the second officer, her back to us, her hands moving as fast as her mouth. The sight of her talking so furiously, so sure she could explain this, a weight tilted the ground under me. For a second, I swayed. Monroe's hand hovered near my elbow, not touching, just ready. "You okay to stand?" she asked. "Yes," I whispered, though my knees felt like hollow glass. "We're going to do 2 things," she said. 1, we'll secure any other containers your mother brought. 2, we'll have a school representative make a brief announcement to cool the crowd. While that happens, I need a quick, clear account from you. Just the facts you remember from this morning. I know that's hard. I could do facts. I'd built 4 years of survival on them." She made a Jarlaman lavender. "Tied a ribbon," I said. "Tried to put it in my tote. At security, you told her it had to go to the loading bay." She circled back. Later, she handed me a plastic bottle with a sticker. "Congrats, grad." The cap looked wrong, not factory. Monroe nodded, eyes flicking to each detail. "Good. Anything else?" My speech pages were swapped. I smelled her hand lotion on the paper. A tiny crease appeared between Monroe's brows. "Thank you." The principal, who had been listening with a taut expression that looked like a pulled muscle, cleared his throat. "Carolyn, I'm so sorry." "The district will, sir," Monroe said gently. "Right now, I'd like a staff member to collect any refreshments associated with the Parker family and place them in a secure area, gloves, bags, chain of custody." He blinked, then jerked into motion, hustling inside. I watched him go and tasted something bitter. Anger, yes, but also a relief so sharp it stung. For once, the adults weren't looking away. "Where's my dad?" I asked, suddenly aware of the absence at my shoulder where he should have been. Monroe tipped her head. I followed her gaze and found him at the corner of the tent, clutching Maya like a life preserver. Ethan stood half a step away, face pale, phone clenched but forgotten in his hand. Their eyes kept darting to Mom, then to me, then back again us. If tallying the distance between the woman they knew and the person in front of them now, do you want them here? Monroe asked. I looked at my family, my quiet father, my still infant sister, my brother with uncertainty cracking his. Smirk-hand, I surprised myself. Yes, I said. Bring them. She gave a small nod to the second officer, who walked over and gestured. In a moment, Dad and the kids were beside me in that wedge of shade. Dad's mouth worked soundlessly before words came out. Carrie, I don't understand. Says to be not a misunderstanding, I said. And if my voice was sharper than I meant, I didn't have room to apologize for it. They have video. Ethan scrubbed a hand over his jaw. What's on it? Enough, I said. Enough to stop her. Maya's fingers found mine. Are you going to jail? She asked me in a tiny whisper. No, I said. No. Bug, I'm not the one in trouble. Her eyes flicked to Mom. Little minds understand more than we want them to. The principal reappeared with a district woman in a navy blazer and a man in a maintenance polo carrying a crate. The maintenance guy wore gloves. Inside the crate were 3 more congrats grad bottles, a mason jar with a gingham lid, and a narrow thermos. My stomach dropped. Good, Monroe said, professional satisfaction flattening her tone. Please seal those. We'll note them for evidence. The woman in the blazer nodded briskly and snapped photos, then helped slide the items into clear bags, each labeled. The sound of the plastic sealing felt like a zipper closing on a past that would never be the same. The second officer had been speaking to Mom this whole time, a low, steady exchange punctuated by her sharp bursts of indignation. Now he guided her a few steps nearer. Not close enough to touch me, just close enough to be undeniable. Caroline, she said, voice breaking into something performative and trembling. Sweetheart, this is insane. Tell them about your anxiety. Tell them you panic about food sometimes. She's twisting it. That woman, she jerked her chin at Monroe, is targeting me. I'm not, Monroe said calmly. I'm protecting your daughter. The word daughter lodged in my throat like a shard of glass. It's protecting your daughter. I waited a lifetime to hear an adult say it with authority. The district woman's radio crackled and she lifted it. A voice spoke in filtered bursts. She turned to Monroe. The nurse is here. She can do a rapid screen on-site for common agents. It's non-definitive, but could inform the response. A hush moved through our cluster, the word agents floating like a wasp. Monroe glanced at me. This is standard, she said. If you prefer we wait for the lab, we can. But immediate screening helps us decide how to proceed with safety for everyone. Present. Safety. Everyone present. There were other kids here. Other parents. My mind flashed to the rows of bottles on the graduates' table. The thought made my blood go cold. Do it, I said, surprising myself with how steady I sounded. Please. The school nurse, a brisk woman I'd only ever seen handing out ice packs, appeared with a small kit. She didn't narrate what she was doing, and I was grateful. She swabbed, dipped, recorded the time. No one said the chemicals out loud. No one needed to. I knew the policy against naming specifics in front of a crowd. I knew enough to be afraid. While we waited, time stretched taut as fishing line. Mom's shoes scraped the concrete as she shifted her weight. Dad stared at them like they were a cliff edge, and he was wondering whether to jump. It was lemonade. Mom said to no one, to everyone. Are we really going to call the police over lemonade? We were called because of tampering, Monroe said mildly. You didn't even taste it. Mom snapped. And there it was, again, that eerie, too bright cheerfulness glued over a simmering fury. No one even tried it. How can anyone know anything without tasting? Ethan flinched. The memory of her hand clamped around his wrist flashed between us like a shard of glass. I saw the way it cut him now in slow time and felt a rush of compassion for the boy who'd never imagined he could be collateral. Mrs. Parker, the district woman said, equal parts steel and sympathy. You have the right to remain quiet. While we figure this out, that would be wise." Mom let out a laugh that didn't sound like her. Nothing about her sounded like her. Maybe, finally, I was hearing the voice beneath the voice. The nurse looked up. "Preliminary indicates presence of a sedating agent in one bottle," she said, clinical and calm. "Again preliminary, but enough for concern. Recommend we separate the implicated items and halt food and beverage service." The world went bright around the edges. My hearing tunneled. Concerned sedating, Mom's face didn't move, but something in her eyes jolted like a startled animal. Dad made a sound that started as a breath and ended as a sob. He pressed one hand to his mouth like the world was spilling out of it. Maya started crying quietly. Ethan swore under his breath, then louder. "What is wrong with you?" It wasn't clever. It wasn't a quip. It was a broken boy's question. Mom took a step toward us, eyes sparkling with a wet, wild light. "I was trying to calm her," she said. "She has panic attacks. I was being a mother. You all want to crucify me for caring." Monroe's voice stayed even. "Mrs. Parker, step back." I said, "Step back." The second officer echoed, softer but firmer. "Caroline," Mom pleaded, and my name in her mouth sounded like a trick. "Honey, tell them. You say yourself you can't sleep. You say you're overwhelmed. I thought if you could just relax, you wouldn't embarrass yourself. You would thank me later." The horrible thing is, there's a version of me that would have grabbed that excuse like a rope. She meant well. She didn't know. It's a version of me who said, "She's my mom. She has to love me." That version rose out of reflex, then met the memory of the bottle at my lips and the speed of her hand when Ethan tried to drink. It met the footage on the monitor and the swapped pages that smelled like lilac. It met the nurse's calm word, presence. No rope could hold against that. "I don't want your kind of help," I said, and every word steadied something inside me. Not anymore. "Caroline," she whispered. Heartbreak cracked wide. "I gave you everything." I felt it before I realized I'd decided. The choice to step out of the wedge of shade and into the full white heat of the lawn toward the tent and the microphone on the little plywood stage. Where 2 hours earlier I'd said something brave while my hands shook. There was a low murmur of curiosity as I climbed the steps. People shifted, lifted their faces, faces I knew and faces I didn't. Mrs. Davenport's tight mouth. Mr. Green's performative frown. Kayla, eyes blazing. The principal saw where I was headed and started toward the stage, but I met his gaze and he stopped. Then he nodded, once, slow. He would let me have this. I stepped to the mic, no speech in my hand, no swapped pages, just the thud of my pulse and the quiet of hundreds. Waiting. "Hey," I said, and my voice came out clear. Still my graduation. "So I'm going to finish my speech." There was a ripple of uneasy laughter that turned quickly into silence. "My name is Caroline," I said. "Most of you know. My mother. You've eaten her pies. You've admired her centerpieces. You've listened to her organized bake sales, and you've watched her smile so hard it hurt your teeth. And some of you have seen the way she talks to me. You laughed it off. You told me it was just teasing. You told me to be grateful." A low stir. People shifting. The discomfort of being named without names. Today a police officer stopped my mother from handing me a drink that a nurse just screened as containing a sedating agent. There's a video of my mother tampering with bottles in the graduate tent. I held up a hand before the noise could swell. "No specifics, no trial here. That will happen somewhere else. But I'm not hiding, not anymore. I won't keep protecting a version of family that only exists in photographs." I found Dad in the crowd, saw him flinch, saw his shoulders fold. Not from shame at me, but at himself. I felt the ache and set it aside. This next part wasn't for him. It was for me. I believed for a long time that love meant making myself smaller so someone else could feel big, I said. I believed. Being a good daughter meant swallowing the words that burned my throat, smiling for the camera, minimizing the hurt. I believed that if I succeeded quietly enough, I would be allowed to keep my success. I smiled. A small, true thing. Turns out you can't bargain with someone else's emptiness. You can't feed it. You can only stop putting yourself on the plate. A hush. Even the AC units seemed to listen. To my classmates, if anyone ever tells you that love looks like sabotage, like control, like the kind of help you have to be sedated to accept, walk away. Run, if you have to. To the parents here who are afraid of this moment because it makes you examine your reflection, I hope you find help that doesn't require harm. I took a breath that tasted like summer heat and the first clean air after a storm. And to the officers who stepped in, thank you. I don't know what today would be if you hadn't. A tiny sound escaped me, half laugh, half sob. That's all, I said and stepped back. Applause didn't burst. It built. It wasn't unanimous, nothing in life is, but it grew into something that held me in place while my knees remembered how to be knees. I saw Kayla clapping first, face wet, then the orchestra kids, then pockets of parents. Some didn't, some folded arms tighter. But enough did that, it felt like a verdict. I descended the steps to find Monroe waiting at the bottom. She didn't say good job or that took guts. She just dipped her head. Respect without spectacle. It steadied me more than any cheer. Then the moment broke. Radios crackled. The district woman waved. The principal slipped to the mic with a bland, soothing statement about safety protocols. The tent began to empty in slow, stunned rivulets. Back by the wall, Mom was watching. Me, if looks could grab ankles, hers would have dragged me back across the grass. She took a step forward, but the second officer shifted with her, a gentle pivot that said, "Not today." "Mrs. Parker," Monroe said evenly, moving to stand beside her. "At this time, we're going to ask you to accompany us to the station too. Provide a statement. You are not under arrest at this moment. But you are not to approach your daughter. Do you understand?" Mom's laugh cracked like thin ice. "You can't tell me not to speak to my child." "I just did," Monroe said. Something in Mom's posture fractured. She looked past Monroe at Dad. Her eyes widened, desperate. "Tell them, David," she said, voice straining for the old soprano sweetness. "Tell them this is a misunderstanding. Tell them Carolyn is dramatic. She always has been." Dad met her gaze and slowly, like lifting a weight he wasn't sure he could carry, shook his head. It was a tiny movement that made the entire day tilt. "No," he said hoarsely. "Not this time." It took the wind out of her. She swayed, then stiffened into a brittle dignity. "If you all want to destroy this family, go ahead," she said. "See who you are without me." For an instant, pity scissored through my sharp, reflexive, useless. Then I let it go. "Already know who I am without you," I said, voice steady. "I like her." Monroe gestured, and the officers guided Mom toward the parking lot where a patrol car waited. Not handcuffs yet. It's just a corridor of absence parting as they walked, neighbors stepping back to let consequence pass through. Ethan watched her go with a face that looked like a collapsed tent emptiness where the poles used to be. "I can't believe," he trailed off, words evaporating. I turned. "To him, you don't have to decide everything today," I said. "But you can decide to be kind. To yourself. To Maya." His throat worked. He nodded. "Yeah." We turned to find Maya wiping her cheeks with both fists. I knelt again, and she folded into me like I was the softest place in the world. "Is Mommy going to jail?" she asked into my hair. "I don't know," I said honestly. "The grown-ups will figure that out. But you and we are going to be okay." Her small head bobbed against my shoulder. "Can I come live with you at college?" I laughed, the sound surprising and real. "Dorm rooms are tiny, bug, but you can visit and I'll call every day if you want. And we'll make a plan with Dad so you feel safe." At the word plan, Dad stepped closer, eyes raw. "Caroline," he said, voice breaking on my name. "I am so sorry for everything I didn't see. For everything I saw and didn't stop. He swallowed hard. If you want me to sign whatever you need for a protective order, I'll do it. If you want me out of the house so you and Maya can feel safe, I'll find a place. I should have been a wall. I was a door. In all my fantasies of this day of, Justice, I never pictured him saying that. Never pictured the dignity of a man setting down pride and picking up responsibility. We'll figure it out, I said softly. Together, but yes, a protective order. He nodded like a man given a map out of fog. A cluster of teachers approached, then Mrs. Laird from English, Mr. Jensen from Chemi Chalkward, in the way adults are when they wish. They could fix what isn't theirs to fix. We're here, Mrs. Laird said, and pressed a card with her personal number into my hand. If you need a witness statement for anything, thank you, I said, and meant it. Kayla barreled into me next, almost knocking me over. We're a dragon, she said into my ear. A literal dragon. I'm so proud of you. Also, I'm on snack confiscation duty. I grabbed 3 suspicious mini mason jars and a bundt cake, just in case. I'm accidentally terrifying the PT. I barked a laugh that turned too quickly into a hitch. Of course you are. We stood there a long time while the lawn emptied and the officers did their careful, boring, life-saving work. The hum of consequence settled into a rhythm. Bags sealed, statements taken, a patrol car easing out of the lot with my mother inside, and the sun glinting off its windshield until it disappeared around the trees. It didn't feel like triumph. Not at first. Felt like standing barefoot after. A storm, the ground littered with branches, and the air washed to clean. I kept waiting for guilt to crash in behind it, for the old shame to latch onto my ribs. For the part of me that always reached toward my mother even when she was aflame to stretch out of habit. Instead, there was the surprising simplicity of a straightened spine, Miss Parker, Monroe said, returning after conferring with the district. Here's what will happen next. The items will go to a lab for confirmatory testing. You'll receive a call about formal statements. The school is instituting a temporary no-contact order on district property today. I'd encourage you to consider a protective order for home and public spaces. I can connect you with an advocate who will walk you through paperwork. Thank you, I said. The words were small for the enormity of what I meant. She held my gaze. You did something incredibly hard today. You kept yourself safe. That nearly undid me more than anything else. I nodded because I couldn't speak. Monroe turned to go, then paused. One more thing, she said quietly. Your speech. The real one. It was stronger without the pages. I smiled helplessly. I think so too. When the last of the tables had been broken down and the last stunned parent had wandered to their SUV. The field looked stripped and honest. No bunting, no banners, just grass and sky. Ready to go home? Dad asked. Like the word home wasn't a house we were going to rearrange from the studs. Not yet, I said. There's one more thing. I walked to the edge of the D stage and found the box of programs tucked under it. I pulled one out and flipped to the back where names stacked in tiny type. I found mine, ran a thumb under it, then lifted the program higher like it could show me what I needed to see. I didn't need a program. I needed a moment. So I climbed back onto the plywood, sat with my legs over the side like a kid on a dock, and let the quiet settle. The lawn smelled like trampled clover and sunscreen. In the distance, a sprinkler hissed on. Kayla plopped beside me. So she said, do we still get celebratory fries? I feel like justice requires fries. I snorted. Yeah, justice absolutely requires fries. Ethan stood below us, hands in pockets. For once, he looked my age, not 2 steps ahead and a head taller with all that unearned confidence. Can I? He swallowed. Can I come? I thought about the boy who'd held out a bottle without thinking it might bite him. I thought about the brother who'd soaked up all the sun while I learned to photosynthesize in shade. Then, I scooted over and patted the plywood. Yeah, I said. Sit. He did. We dangled our feet together like kids. For a minute, no one talked. We didn't need to. Dad sat on the grass below like a supplicant and glanced at me for permission not to sit, not to parent, but to begin again. I nodded. He put an arm around Maya, who leaned into him with the boneless trust of childhood. The sun tilted. The shadows lengthened. And in that oddly quiet, almost sacred afterspace, I felt it finally, not the crash of victory, but the clean click of justice aligning with truth. Not spectacle, not revenge on a stage, something sturdier. Monroe passed by one last time on her way to her cruiser and lifted 2 fingers in a small salute. I returned it. No big words. No medals. Just 2 women acknowledging a hard line held. I slipped my honor cords from my neck and coiled them in my lap. They were only strands of fabric, but they felt like proof of hours spent choosing myself when no one else did. I tied them once, twice, a quiet knot. "Let's go," I said. Finally standing. Starving. We walked to the car, Dad, Maya, Ethan, Kayla, and Mitha. And Mitha, 5 of us stitched together by something messy and real. The patrol car was gone. The tents were down. Tomorrow, there would be paperwork and calls and grief and plans. But right now, there was a diner 5 blocks away and a plate of fries with our names on it. I glanced back once at the empty stage. It didn't look like a battlefield anymore. It looked like what it was, a place where I told the truth out loud and didn't die. And that, more than any certificate, felt like the beginning of a life. Graduation. Night is supposed to end with laughter, flowers, and photos taped to refrigerators. Mine ended in a booth at a 24-hour diner, the kind with sticky menus and fries that come in baskets lined with wax paper. The neon sign hummed above. The window, painting our faces in pink and blue, as if we were already living inside some strange new chapter. I sat between Ethan and Kayla, across from us. Dad slid into the booth with Maya curled against his side, already half asleep with her head on his arm. None of us said much at first. We just let the silence exist. The clink of silverware and the sizzle from the kitchen filling the space where a family used to be. When the food came, 3 baskets of fries, 2 burgers, 1 grilled cheese, cut diagonally, Maya stirred and blinked awake. Can we pretend this is the party?" she asked softly. I smiled, reaching for a fry. "Yes, Bug, 'tis the party." By the time we pulled back into the driveway, the house on Ashwood Lane felt different. Not bigger, not smaller, just hollow. The front porch light glowed like an empty stage, waiting for actors who would never arrive. Mom wasn't there. Patrol car had carried her somewhere else, leaving only the echo of her perfume on the curtains and the neat rows of cupcakes spelling Ethan's name on the kitchen counter. Maya went straight upstairs, carrying her stuffed rabbit under one arm. Ethan disappeared into his room, door shut with a soft click. Dad lingered in the living room, shoulders slumped as though he'd been carrying weights for years and had only now noticed their mass. I stood in the hallway, staring at the family portrait that hung crooked above the mantel. The 4 of us before Maya was born, smiling stiffly at a mall photographer. I must have been 8, missing a front tooth. Mom's hand clamped my shoulder, fingers digging through my cardigan. At the time, I thought it was just posing. Now, I wondered if it had always been a grip. Dad joined me, his voice gravelly. "Should I take it down?" I thought about it. "No," I said, "not yet. Leave it. I want to remember, but I want to remember honestly." He nodded, as if that was something he hadn't considered before, that remembering didn't always mean forgiveness. But sometimes. Clarity. The days blurred. Officials called. There were forms, statements, meetings with people who spoke in legal language. The lab confirmed what the nurse had suspected. The bottle Mom pressed into my hand contained a sedative strong enough to disorient an adult, let alone a nervous 18-year-old giving a speech. The district issued a formal statement, sanitized for the press. A parent violated beverage policy. That's all the public got. But inside our small town, whispers spread faster than the truth ever could. At the grocery store, I felt eyes on me. Some were sympathetic, others sharp with judgment. Mrs. Davenport tried to corner me near the cereal aisle. I always said Linda was a perfectionist. You poor dear. What a burden. I looked her straight in the eye. You always saw. You just never spoke. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. I walked away. Ethan was the hardest to read. For a week, he stayed mostly silent, retreating into late-night basketball at the driveway hoop. I'd hear the steady bounce, bounce, bounce of the ball under the street lamp until long past midnight. One night, I went out and sat on the curb while he played. Eventually, he dropped the ball and sank down beside me. I thought I was special. He said, voice raw. I thought Mom loved me more because I deserved it. Turns out she just needed someone to polish, and I let her. It wasn't your fault, I said. She decided who got the spotlight. You just stood where she pointed it. He scrubbed a hand over his face. I should have noticed what she did to you. You see it now, I told him. Enough to start with. He nodded, eyes glistening in the sodium light. It was the first time I'd seen my brother, not as a rival, not as Mom's golden child, but just as a kid grappling with the rubble of the same house. Dad surprised me too. Quiet ghost-like Dad, who had always melted into the wallpaper, suddenly began stepping forward. He drove Maya to school. He cooked breakfast, even sat Ethan and me down one evening and said, I'm going to therapy. All of us can if you want. I don't want silence to be my only legacy. The words cracked something open in me. For years, I'd begged silently for him to see me. Now he was looking directly at me, eyes steady. Okay, I said. I'll try. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a beginning. When the news came that Mom would face charges, I didn't feel triumph. I felt grief, strange, slippery grief that didn't fit neatly into categories. I grieved the mother I'd hoped she could be. Grieved the childhood that might have been softer. But beneath it all, I felt something I hadn't in years. Freedom. I started running in the mornings, pounding the pavement until the air seared my lungs. With every mile, I thought about how close I'd come to never seeing a college dorm room, never sitting in another classroom, never laughing with Kayla over coffee. I thought about the officer's voice. Safe now, let it echo like a promise. 1 week before I left for university, a letter arrived in the mail. The return address was the county facility. I didn't open it right away. I left it on my desk, staring at the familiar handwriting, curling my name, Carolyn. When I finally tore the envelope, the words were predictable. You don't understand how much pressure I was under. I only wanted what's best. You embarrassed me. I was trying to save you from yourself. You'll regret turning against me. I folded the paper carefully and set it back in the envelope. Then I walked outside and burned it in the fire pit, watching the smoke rise into the twilight sky. Some things don't deserve to follow you. The night before I left for college, I stood in my room one last time. The walls were bare, the posters taken down, the shelves empty. For years, this room had been both prison and sanctuary. Now, it was just 4 walls and a window. Maya came in, eyes wet. Don't go, she whispered. I hugged her tight. Have to, but I'll call every day. And you'll visit, remember? Fries at the diner, movies at my dorm. She sniffled. Promise. Hey, don't forget us when you're all fancy and successful. I smirked. You mean when we're successful? You too, golden boy? He gave me a small, sheepish smile. It was enough. On Mauvin Day, as Dad carried boxes into my dorm room, I paused at the window. Students laughed outside, dragging suitcases across the quad. The future hummed with possibility. I thought back to the moment on stage when I'd told the truth into a microphone and didn't die. I thought about Monroe's calm voice, Maya's innocent question, Ethan's shaken faith, Dad's halting apology. And I thought about my mother, escorted away in the sun, her grip finally broken. The lesson wasn't simple, wasn't good wins, evil loses. It was that love without safety isn't love at all, okay? That family isn't defined by who shares your blood, but by who protects your heart. Sometimes I still hear her voice in my head. Sometimes I wake with the phantom taste of lemon on my tongue. But then I remember I chose not to drink. I chose not to swallow what she handed me. And that choice, more than any scholarship, more than any honor cord, was what saved my life. So here's what I know now. Survival is not the same as living. Silence is not the same as peace. And the truest revenge isn't screaming louder than your enemies, it's building a life so strong they can't touch it. I walked across that graduation stage thinking the day had been stolen from me. But in truth, it gave me everything. It gave me clarity. It gave me freedom. It gave me the courage to walk away from poison in all its forms. As I set up my books on a new shelf and pinned photos of Maya and Kayla to a corkboard, I smiled. My story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. And this time, it was mine, and that was my story. Graduation wasn't the ending I expected. It was the beginning of my freedom. If you felt every twist, every betrayal, and every moment of justice with me, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It lets me know you're standing right beside me. Subscribe to the channel if you want more true-to life stories of family drama, betrayal, and revenge. You won't want to miss the next one. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? I'll be reading every single one. Until next time, remember, the best revenge is living a life that poison can't touch.